Teddy.
I'm Dimitri.
And we're going for a drive.
2020 Dodge Challenger.
SCAT PACK 392 wide body with launch control. Dude, that's sick!
Horsepower and torque!
485 horsepower with 475 foot-pounds of torque with a 6.4 liter V8.
And we have this in automatic. I'm sorry to have cut away from that since the Straightpipes have stolen our intro almost shot for shot. As you can see, we're in deep litigation right now and I'm suing them for roughly $387. But we are underneath the SCAT PACK Challenger wide body. The wide body started on the Demon and kind of has worked its way down to the Red Eye, now to the normal Challengers and Chargers. And you almost have to have a PhD in Dodge to understand all the trim levels and options. So I'm not going to get into all of that. But in terms of the technical information, the wide body makes this car a bit larger. It also enables them to run wider wheels and tires. This is a 20-inch forged wheel that is 11 inches wide, and this runs a 305 size tire squared, which is a good thing and a bad thing, meaning you have the amazing usable grip for a V8 like this that is also rotatable, so you can move these tires front to back, so you're not dealing with a staggered setup. Now, the other thing that the wide body package gives you is the 6-piston Brembos, a flat bottom steering wheel, these adaptive dampers that are also Bilstein, and this is something you're going to see on like the Hellcats. So what they've done is they've tuned this somewhere in the middle, and we're going to talk about that more on the drive. This is way more streetable than what's on the Hellcats and the Red Eyes. It's far more soft, it's far more comfortable for daily driving. That's what this car is about. A little bit more practicality, if you can even call it that. But again, with all the Challenger and Chargers, the entire lineup, they have kind of the base with the V6 and even the all-wheel drive V6, and they spread it out to the extreme. And that's why the SCAT PACK Charger wide body is kind of a good middle ground for somebody that really wants to use this every day. Now, I've had the opportunity to speak with some of the engineers who worked on these cars, from engine, transmission, body structure, suspension. And they are unapologetic about the fact, and proud of, that they've taken something that has older roots and made it one of the highest performing machines in the world. And this is something that's dying, and we continue to have this discussion about performance cars more and more. Each year, V8s are dying. We're replacing them with 4 cylinders. Now EVs are coming in. This is a loud, brash, throwback car that I'm glad exists, and while they never said that it's for everybody, it certainly has its detractors, but it also has the people that really appreciate what they're trying to do. So you have 5 transmission options, starting with the Tremec TR6060. This is one of the most brutish, enjoyable manual transmissions on the market that's only available on the Challenger, and you can get it optional on the SCAT PACK. It has such positive engagement. I had the opportunity to just drive the piss out of one of these, or a Hellcat version of it, at Bondurant Racing School, and I would have never thought this car would have been enjoyable around a track with a manual trans, but it is. Then you have the 8 HP 50, which is a ZF gearbox. They call it the Torque Flight. That is the lowest in the automatic transmissions. Again, all 8 speeds, that's for the V6 model. The V6 with the all-wheel drive gets a separate automatic trans, and then you have the 8 HP 70, which goes in this car, which again has different torque holding values for the torque converter, and it is also available in the 5.7 liter. Then you get up to the 8 HP 90, which goes in the Red Eyes, it goes in the Demon, it goes in all basically Hellcat and up transmissions for the most torque holding possible. And they're all tuned just a little bit different as you go up the tiers. Now, in terms of suspension, you have double wishbone. Pretty much everything is steel here. This looks like an older vehicle. And again, they have improved things over time, but let's take a look at the back. In the rear of the SCAT PACK Widebody, you have an 18-gallon fuel tank, which you're going to be using immensely. The next part is, because you have the wide body, your coefficient of drag is worse. Not like you care about that, but the weight is also more than the narrow body by about 100 pounds, give or take. Now, the other thing to talk about with the SCAT Pack or getting the 6.4 liter option, you get an LSD by default with a 309 gear ratio. The 5.7 liter gets a 308 and the option of a limited slip differential, of course, or what you get in this car. Now, in the back, it's what you see on pretty much every Challenger. It's all steel, with the exception of one lower control arm and the knuckle. You have Bilstein dampers that are adaptive in the back based on your SRT drive modes. The last thing to say is the 70 series ZF transmission that's in here has a slightly different third gear ratio than the 90 series transmission in the Hellcats, which I think is a typo, but other than that, there's so many similarities in all these cars that the main difference is in a lot of the electronic tuning that you get. So this feels, in the rear end, much softer to me than when you go to a Hellcat. There's a little bit more body motion. And again, like I talked about at the start, a lot of that is on purpose. But let's get this on the road and see what it's like to drive.
Back in a Challenger, and you're back in shotgun. It's not a Hellcat, but it still does do that quite well, Mark.
What's the road holding numbers?
I think it's actually close to 1G with the wide body, Mark. It is surprisingly a capable automobile. We spent a lot of time in these cars, specifically the Hellcat variants, at Bondurant almost a year ago now, right? For about 4 to 3 days, and I think that experience changed my perception of the Challenger and Charger. I think these cars, for better or for worse, have a negative connotation as kind of these big boats, which at 4,300 pounds or just around there, it is a big car. I think dynamically these things carry themselves rather well. I mean, you've spent time in this and basically every Challenger, Charger variant known to man at this point. What are your takeaways?
Well, I think when we went to Bondurant, you realize quickly that when you drive these in a hurry, like we did on the track, it was surprising at how good all the core fundamental dynamics were. It trail brakes, it rotates, there's a lot of weight transfer, yet it's controllable, obviously when you get to the higher trim levels. But I think, you know, they do such a good job and they've had all this time to master everything that they have here. It's tried and true, it works, they know how to get the most out of it, and that's why this car is definitely underrated from a performance perspective in the corners. But again, you're starting with something that's enormous, and there's only so much you can do. But I think where they're at now is a really good balance between that muscle car, pony car, go fast in a straight line, and it still has enough handling that most people are going to love driving it.
Yeah, I think these cars, specifically the SCAT Pack, is an interesting vehicle. It's supposed to be the sweet spot in the Challenger Charger lineup. This is their best seller in the lineup with the 6.4 liter V8, and they start relatively inexpensively and with rebates in the low to mid 30s, which given the performance per dollar ratio is pretty impressive. I do think that value proposition, once you tack on the wide body and all the carbon and all of the other garbage that's in this cabin, you know, at nearly 50 grand, you're better off just getting the Hellcat at that point.
Well, yeah, if you're going to spend 50 grand, you might as well just go for the Hellcat. But I mean, you can get this stripped down a little bit more, and that's why it sells so much, because you can get it cheap. It's a volume car for them. It's been out for a long time. You know what to expect from it, and you have a manual in the Challenger, and that's why this car is so attractive. I mean, I think we've covered pretty much all the negatives and positives of every single trim level on the Challenger.
Because we've done, at this point, every trim level. We've done the Demon, regular Hellcat Charger, red-eye Challenger, and we didn't do a video on it, but we spent time in the V6 variant. And you know, there's something for pretty much everybody in this lineup. I will say dynamically, despite having the wide body, some of the core inputs and some of the basic feature of this car feel a bit off. Particularly in the automatic, the throttle sensitivity is ridiculous. It's way too sensitive in basically every position, and that wasn't the case in the manual variant of this car that we drove. And then obviously these seats. Now, we've beat the interior to death, and you know, they're improving their quality according to all of their JD Power awards, but some of their core fundamentals, specifically the seats, are atrocious.
Well, yeah, I mean, they look great, but when you get in them, it's just, there's something wrong with the lower bolster, and I think some of it has to do with the lack of adjustment here. I just always feel like my legs are 6 feet long, even though they're not, because the lower cushion is just not supportive.
And you have no adjustment in the passenger seat.
Correct, yeah. So, I mean, it's little stuff like this. I mean, again, you know what you're getting into if you're looking at this car. If you've already have your mindset wrapped around this, you're going to buy it regardless. It's just a matter of picking the trim level and all the options that you want.
And it'll do stupid things like that pretty much all day long.
Yeah, and it sounds great. And that's, to me, the biggest selling point of the Challenger. Let's head into the shop and talk about the final thoughts, Jack.
All right.
Final thoughts on the Challenger SCAT PACK Widebody. It's no surprise that this is one of the best-selling Dodge products, at least the SCAT PACK is. And that's because they've found a great balance between giving you a high-performance engine, an automatic transmission that doesn't feel like crap, and a manual transmission that's great. You combine it with power that is usable. It's a naturally aspirated power, now with the wide body, with wider wheels and tires that are squared. You have tons of grip, you have tons of traction, you have an interior compartment that is great for most body types. You could be huge and still fit in here. And the seats, we could argue about the design of them for comfort, but this is a completely usable muscle car for this type. You have a trunk that's enormous. There's not too much like this. And the fact, like I talked about in the shop, that this entire concept of huge displacement V8s, naturally aspirated V8s, continues to go down the toilet, it's hard to argue that they are committed as a brand to keep this alive. And that's one of the reasons why I've grown a lot more respect for these types of cars. Now, I brought it up and Jack brought it up. We were at Bondurant. We've worked with Extreme Experience, who takes kind of exotic cars and high performance cars to the track so people can beat on them. And between Bondurant running these things all day, including the Hellcats, and Extreme Experience, they both said the same thing. They were one of the most reliable, sporty muscle cars they've ever had, and they've had to do minor amounts of stuff to them, and they've just held up. Now, of course, this isn't a Toyota Camry. You know, we're not talking about reliability like that. We're talking about reliability in terms of like the performance components. You may still have some chicken shit issues with these, and that's kind of the cons of this. And I've gotten myself in trouble with FCA harping on interior quality, harping on build quality, but that's something that they're starting to update. Like the new interiors are coming out, so you're gonna see this get kind of improved over time. So price is still attainable, performance is still not so nuts you're gonna kill yourself on the street. I think this is one of the most interesting products of this type in the sports car, pony car, muscle car, whatever you want to call it, market. And people continue to buy them. It's unique. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Dude, that's sick. 4,000 doors. 485